Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 134 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Mike Koomar with me. And Mike, Saturday Night Live of the round of 32, chronological order. Let's throw that to the side. We just had a huge game go final. You can see it on the screen if you are watching. Texas goes to the Sweet 16 with a 74-68 victory over Mark Few and Gonzaga. This Texas team was not playing particularly well towards the end of the season and into the SEC tournament, but they get to the first four. They beat NC State, they beat BYU, and now they stop Gonzaga from going to their 10th straight Sweet 16. Mike, this run from Texas has sort of come out of nowhere.
Yeah, this is certainly shocking to see. Texas lost 5 out of 6 games going into the tournament, limped into the first four, and it just seemed like they just needed to get a win. They got that win early on in the week and then had to travel more than halfway across the country to go to Portland. They took care of business against Brigham Young, and then they really just slowed down Gonzaga. This was a good Gonzaga team that we thought had a lot of promise. I thought they had a chance of going to an Elite Eight this year, but Texas just all of a sudden just caught lightning in a bottle. We've seen this happen plenty of times in March, where you just need to get across the finish line in one game. They had that nail biter win against NC State, and that seemed to have opened the curtains. This is kind of eerily similar to that UCLA team in the 2021 NCAA tournament, got into the first four barely, and then was able to make it all the way to the Final Four and almost to the championship game. So, really interesting stuff out of Sean Miller's squad. He's just seemed to get the best of his team this past week. Now, 3 wins this week. Very impressive
And, and
um,
for and for
for Sean Miller's
Gonzaga,
squad.
Mike, they didn't look so great in their first round game against Kennesaw State. They really let the Owls hang around, and if
Yeah.
if they had been like a little bit of a better team, I think they probably could have won that game. But they never really had control of this one. Obviously,
No.
multiple games are on now, and we're going to aim to keep this around a half an hour just because we got to get back to the action. But this I wasn't watching, every single play here and seeing every single call, but I felt like Texas was right there the whole way. That seems to be. This is not how upsets have happened this year. The big two
No.
ones, VCU and High Point, have been the team that was supposed to win led for 90% of the way, and then they collapsed late. This was not that. This is exactly what we said, Joe and I, when they beat BYU. They controlled a majority of this game. It's not as if they went nuclear from three, just 5 of 15. Tremont Mark, 2 of 10. But you get 17 from Vokia Titus and Pope, and you get the big shot from Heidi, which is his only 3 points of the game, that ultimately ended up winning them the game. But yeah, out of nowhere for Texas. And I don't think they're doing anything crazy different than they were before. They're just a little bit better on the margins. You're -5 in rebounds here. You're -1 in assists. You're +2 in turnovers. You didn't foul a lot. It's just a pretty solid performance from the Longhorns all around.
Yeah, and something that's you're not going to see on the box score in this one really was look, Gonzaga was up by 8, and they looked like they were kind of cruising midway to the latter part of the first half, and we just saw several key plays by Kendall Weaver. He's just kind of a guy that comes off the bench, gets about 20 minutes a game for Texas. He's really the glue guy. He's been there for 3 years, just knows the system well, has played for a multitude of coaches now at this point, and was able to just make some big plays to get Texas back into the swing of things and even into the first half lead. Wasn't as impactful in the second half, but really a huge glue guy for Texas to get them moving. Look, Gonzaga just looks sloppy. And they had several instances to get back into this game. Look, Texas hit. I thought Gonzaga was going to have a chance to hit the game winning shot before Texas hits a dagger corner three to reach the Sweet 16 for the first time, I think, since 2023. So, man, what a game for the Longhorns. A team that's just had so much turnover in their program, it seems like. They haven't had consistent success since the late 2000s. Kind of shocking to see that of all years, this is the one that they can advance.
Yeah, they've really a lot of teams these days are having player turnover, but they've had a ton of coaching turnover even in the last 15 or so years. They haven't got somebody to stick. They've gotten a lot
No,
of good coaches in there, but they have, for whatever reason or the other, they haven't stuck. Chris Beard, Shaka Smart, Rick Barnes, um, you know, Rodney Terry ended
Rodney
up
Terry.
he ended up in the role,
Yeah.
but he did earn it after that season that he took over midseason on a day's
Yeah.
notice for that one game against Rice. But yeah, impressive here from Texas. They will play um, the West Region 2 or 3 in the next round. I think that's tomorrow game. West Region, yeah. So they're going to play the winner of Purdue and Miami in the Sweet 16 next week in California. So could be an interesting one there. All right, Mike, we had Joe on the first 2 days. We just wanted to get to that first because it just happened. But, Thursday and Friday, round of 64, we had a few major headlines. Anything that you want to hit on before we get into the round of 32?
Yeah, I think there were Thursday was a pretty wild day of college hoops. I think
Yeah.
that was the most wild NCAA tournament game that we've seen in or day that we've seen in several years. Things slowed down a little bit on Friday. We still had a lot of really good action, but in these late games, it kind of just seemed like the teams that were supposed to win took care of things. There were definitely some highlights though in this one. Look, Kentucky's near half court shot to send that game into overtime and then finding a way to beat Santa Clara. Something I thought Santa Clara was going to win that game. It just felt like the entire way they had that game taken care of. And then obviously Kevin Willard coming under fire for his comments, which I don't know why you'd take that seriously. He was obviously joking in jest, and then to close out the night with UCLA and Miami taking care of business. So not as big many fireworks, but I think tomorrow there could be a ton of fireworks. I think you're going to have to look out for UCLA over UConn. I'm picking the Bruins in that one to upset the Huskies.
Well, one of those games you mentioned, Mike, we recorded before that game really sort of started. That was Miami over Missouri. We talked about the draw. It was in St. Louis. Is it the most fair? Didn't seem to matter. Miami ends up winning by 14. This was truly a toss up game down the stretch, though. But Jai Lucas and the Hurricanes get a victory in year one. Um, and this team is like I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I think like they're going to be a lot better in the future. Like the individuals, the sum of the parts, whatever that means, but they have a couple of good players that all play their role, and they beat a solid Missouri team in hostile territory. So I think Miami deserves a lot of credit for this season, and they were able to cap it off with a round of 64 win.
Yeah, I think if you had to go into this season as a Miami fan, uh, going to the NCAA tournament would have exceeded your expectations with how terrible last season went. So to even get an NCAA tournament win, the Miami fan base should be ecstatic. Look, it's going to be an uphill climb the rest of the tournament. I don't think things are going to go well this way, but you looked at this game was a tie ball game. Well, actually, they were I think they were losing
Yeah.
with about 8 minutes to go in this one. And they really kind of took charge and dominated coming down the stretch, got a lot of big stops, and were able to score in bunches. But yes, for this Miami squad, you look at what they've been able to do, what a difference a year makes. And look, who knows? Maybe they can find a way to upset Purdue and add another wrinkle into the NCAA tournament that's already been. But got to be happy for this Miami squad in Jai Lucas's first year.
Yeah, they brought it, and they did on their in the final 9 minutes of the game. Mike, they only didn't score on 2 possessions. That's going to be awfully
Yeah,
hard to lose when you do that,
yeah.
if you're in a close game. In terms of one more game from Thursday, Mike, I want to get into, and there were some headlines after the fact. It was, one of the two major upsets on the day. It was VCU, who are in action right now against Illinois, and they're playing some kind of game at halftime. Don't get me started on that. But VCU beats North Carolina in overtime. It was a game that North Carolina had control of. They blow it. VCU moves on to the next round. We talked about the game, Joe, and I won't ask you for that, but there's some rumors coming out of North Carolina the past few days since this game happened on Thursday that they're considering making a change at the head coaching position. Wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think Bubba Cunningham will pull the trigger on Hubert Davis?
Yeah, it sounds like UNC is going to be meeting with Hubert Davis in the upcoming week to discuss his future after really a shocking tournament loss. Look, you look at Hubert Davis's tenure at UNC. look, they made the Final Four and they went to the championship game. I believe that was his first or
Yeah,
his second season
first.
there, first season. But even in that year, they didn't have that great of a year. They just got hot in the end of the season. But that season is going to be remembered for UNC retiring Coach K, and they're going to hold on to that for a long time. But I think that season really, Hubert Davis had to ride the coattails that season for a long time. UNC's better than that. They really are, and they'll. UNC is going to be very respectful if they decide to go their separate ways from Hubert Davis. He's a UNC legend. He played there. He's obviously been on the coaching staff there for I think close to a decade before he became the head coach. So regardless, I think probably what UNC is looking for is complete staff turnover. And if Hubert Davis isn't okay with that, then they're going to probably try to quietly dismiss him. Um, and if that job comes up on the market, Sean, that's one of the top five best jobs in college basketball.
Yeah, you
So you're going to see a lot of major coaches, big time coaches that we're probably still watching. Going to be looked at for this job. And you're not just going to be looking at the usual mid majors. There's going to be Final Four caliber coaches that are going to be looked at for this job.
when it
Um,
comes to this job, Mike, I think now the AD for UNC, he did try and walk back his comments at first. He was reached for comment and gave to various media outlets that, they're going to talk about the outlook of the program in the next few days, and then he sort of backtracked it today, where he's like, we do this at the end of every basketball season, and look, I think they're seriously considering it. I think you do have to do your homework here. Who would be interested in it if you do let him go? The UNC fans online are certainly not realistic in their expectations. That they've got some people on the short list who aren't, like, they shouldn't even bother with. Um, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm probably 50-50 on it now, whether they tell him to, get a whole new staff, and I don't believe they have a GM yet. That would be something that they'd certainly need. They had a decent amount of money this year. They brought in a few transfers. Obviously, Vasar was really solid, but they spent a lot of money on
yeah,
Kyan Evans to be the point guard, and he did not meet expectations. So, is there a GM? Is there new assistants, or is it a whole new staff? And I think that I'd say about 50-50 right now. It was less so yesterday, but I think they might make a change. It seems like the UNC people in the media, specifically Tyler Hansborough, is like, everyone's so shocked this happened. I'm not. They're soft, and
yeah.
they have
And,
blown
and
some
and look,
leads before.
how different would this season have been if Caleb Wilson
Yeah,
doesn't go
that's
down?
that's a big thing.
And I think you've got to also think about that. If UNC teams in the past, if Tyler Hansborough had been out,
Yeah,
that those UNC teams they wouldn't have made the Final Four. They wouldn't have won the national championship, right? You took the best player off of their roster, and that took them from a Sweet 16 Elite Eight team to a round 32 team, or just like that. So I think if if UNC if this job opens up though, UNC they will be swinging big. They will be swinging for the fences, trying to get someone like Nate Oates, Grant McCaslin, TJ Osselberger. I mean, they might even try to take a swing at Todd Golden. I don't know if if or why he'd leave, but that would be somebody that they would try to get. Scott Drew, I think, would be another one at Baylor that they would pursue. They're not just going to be looking for your typical mid-major coach
and
here. This is a huge job.
I think there's a few. I think most of those names probably end up saying no, Mike. Like, if you're Otzelberger, like, you have it going at Iowa State. Like, I don't know if I would really try and mess that up. Oates, I don't know with Oates.
Hey, we said the same thing about Lane Kiffin at Ole
Yes,
Miss.
well, yes, but what's the deal with Oates? Like, are they really as bad at NIL as some of the rumors are? Like, are they really in the bottom half of the SEC? It would be hard to believe that. He's gotten a lot of top recruits there, and when it comes to
Yeah.
McCasland, I don't think UNC can match the financial backing there. Um, but let's go into the world, Mike, for a brief second here, because we do have a lot of games to get to. But the move is made. I think Mark Byington is a example. I think Scott
Yep.
Drew is a candidate because when Kentucky opened, they were very interested in him, and I think he was pretty close to going there. He ended up
He
bringing his
was.
family to Lexington and showing him around. And I don't know if he said yes and then backed out or was very close to saying yes, but he was very close to being Kentucky's coach. So I think Chapel Hill is probably a nicer place to live than Lexington. I think the fans are a lot less ridiculous in Chapel Hill
Yep.
than Lexington. So those are the two names that I would look at as real possibilities if it does open.
Yeah, I don't like that
Yeah,
at all. But I 100% agree that I think he would be a legit coaching candidate to go to Chapel Hill for that one. And I think he would. I hate to say it, but I think he'd be a good fit there as well. But let's hope one of those other names where Mark Byington goes, or maybe even Hubert Davis stays. We'd be okay
yeah.
with that too.
He
It's
might
fine.
get the family discount year that Juwan Howard got at Michigan, that Penny Hardaway is in the process of getting next year at Memphis. Um, but the standard at Carolina has dropped a little bit. They missed the tournament. They got in last year when they really didn't deserve to,
They didn't deserve. Yeah,
and they had a really good team this year. And yeah, your best player went out, but Texas Tech's best player went out too, and Iowa State's best players out right now. We'll see what they do. So you can't let that really torpedo the season like it did. But all right, Mike, we
yeah.
do have a lot of games here on Saturday to get to. We started off with Michigan going up against St. Louis. Dusty May, Josh Schertz, really good friends. This was a really fun game. Michigan ends up pushing it out 95-72 at the end of it. But, what was your takeaway from this one?
Yeah, look, this game was a lot closer for most of it than the
Yeah.
final score really reflected. Two guys that it's been well documented had a great relationship, and look, it's just one of those things. It's really it's easy for a team to hang with one of these top level teams for 10 minutes. Sometimes a little less likely to happen for 20, but sometimes these teams hang with them for 30 minutes. And it's a really competitive 30 minutes of basketball. In those last 10 minutes, we get a complete shift. And that's really what happened here in this one. Look, St. Louis just they couldn't maintain that level of competitiveness with Michigan. They just kind of got worn out. And it kind of went downhill pretty quick for the Billikens. But I think regardless, is going to be looked at as a great season. We'll see if there is a new head coach in St. Louis next year. I think there's a likelihood that it is. But regardless, this will be a season to remember. Probably St. Louis's best season since Rick Majerus was the head coach there.
Yeah, they were very fun to watch. The fact of the matter is if they hadn't been so bad at the end of the regular season, they were probably in line for a 5 or a 6 seed. And, they
Yeah.
limped in, but they smoked Georgia at the round of 64, and they hung with Michigan here. Michigan had a great game. This was Michigan at its peak. And
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe nobody can beat them when they play like that, when they hit 48% of their threes and 56% of their field goals. But I was, they hung with them a little bit here, but Michigan just proved to be too much, and they really did wear down a little bit, and it does sort of, when teams wear down, they do sort of hit the wall. But when it comes
Yeah.
to St. Louis, Mike Schertz signed a huge extension there with a huge buyout. So I would actually lean him being there next year and potentially waiting for a little bit of a better crop of jobs to pick from, because
Yeah.
the North Carolina opening would be big, but other than that, it's Providence that's the biggest job. They already have their guy in mind, and it's going to be broken here within the next day. If I had to guess, I believe Brian Hodgson from South Florida will be going to Providence, from the rumors on the ground. But Michigan, elite offensively and defensively, and when you find a team like that, it's going to be really hard to beat them. All right, game
Yeah, absolutely.
two. Or yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say this Michigan team is one of the best teams in the country. So, when you get them playing as elite as they were today, it's just tough to hang with them. St. Louis needed one of their worst days, Michigan's worst days, for them to be able to win, and they just weren't going to get that.
And when it comes to the way that St. Louis has done this, Mike, in the age of NIL, even in the age of the transfer portal, these smaller teams can have a real rotation. Like St. Louis
Yeah,
played 9 players at least 10 minutes today. You see VCU
Mhm.
right now, and then hasn't been such a great start to the second half for them, but they play like significant bench minutes. Michigan plays 8 solid players that any of them could be in the end of the game if it's close. With rotations shortening, with the TV timeouts allowing for teams to maybe do that, it seems like these teams that do have like a real bench aren't hitting the wall. And I know St. Louis did here, but that is a small takeaway that I'm seeing here is that having an actual bench kind of matters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It really does. And I think even right now in college basketball, it's really hard to win games day in and day out when you've got only a rotation of 7 players. I mean, we've seen it this year with plenty of schools that had a lot of really good talent. I'll throw my Baylor Bears in there, for example. Baylor's
Yeah.
got 2 first-round picks on their team this year. Um, they play 7 guys deep and it they just get tired coming down the stretch. So I think we are still, entering back into an era that's kind of different than we saw 5 years ago when you live and die by the three and you don't need to have depth. That's definitely not the case anymore. We're seeing a lot of teams that don't shoot the three ball all that great, but are still very efficient on offense. And stacked benches really also are clearly a lot of help.
And just the physicality of the game right now. And you know what, we can
Yeah.
probably get to this during the week, Mike, or when the season's over, about why Cinderellas are not happening anymore. It's because all of these elite teams are super physical. You look at
Yeah.
Michigan, 3 huge guys on the front line. You look at Illinois right now; they're the tallest team in Division One. It's just turning off the water at the rim really leaves you only open for a 3 point barrage, and those don't come around every day. So I think there is a little
No.
bit of a turn towards being really good at defense inside rather than just playing the numbers game and trying to make a lot of threes. A lot of teams do that are pretty good, but the elite teams only there's only a few of them that are even in the top 100 in 3 point rate. And game
Yeah.
2 of the day, Mike, was a pretty stark contrast in the modern game versus the traditional game with Tom Izzo and Michigan State taking on Pat Kelsey in Louisville. Spartans win 77-69. That pretty much is the story of this one. Michigan State didn't blow them out, but they had them at arm's length. I think Louisville cut it to 4 maybe. But Michigan State was always sort of a step ahead here in the second half. It's Cohen Carr with 21 and 10, a couple of awesome highlight dunks. Fears 12 and 16 assists, and
Yeah.
the theory that
Man.
Louisville can't beat teams better than them, unfortunately for them, holds today. But Spartans are going to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I mean, Fears was incredible in this game. You highlighted that 16 assists in this one.
And he's
Some of
done that a
those
few
were
times too.
he has
Yeah.
it's so many tremendous passes. I mean, as unlikable as some fans, including our guy Joe Mead, might think Jeremy Fears is.
Oh, he's
He's a,
unlikable, but he's a good player.
yeah, yeah, but he's a
Yeah.
really good player. Like we haven't seen something like this since Grayson Allen, if I'm being honest. But look, Michigan State just always was a step ahead, as you said in this one. Louisville got this game close several times, but they never really were threatening to take a lead. It just seemed like this was clear Spartan victory. And look, I think Michigan State looks really good going into the Sweet 16, and I expect them to make more noise the rest of March as I highlight in the bracket.
And they will be playing the winner of UCLA and UConn. UConn,
Yeah,
a team that went toe to toe with Furman for 38 minutes yesterday. And if not for a
yeah,
heroic game by Terrace Reed, perhaps the Paladins would be playing tomorrow in the round of 32. But Mike, I think this game specifically really, brings home the point that we've been trying to make is that 3 point barrages get you a good team that can beat anybody and get you into the tournament. But when it comes to winning a championship or winning, 15 out of 20 games in the conference, that's probably not the best strategy. I mean, Louisville was either 500 in the ACC or just above. And the ACC was solid this year, but I think
yeah.
I think that is the way that the game is moving. So Louisville's 11 and 7, so they were a little bit over 500, um, but yeah, I think this one sort of, if I had to predict what this one was, I think this went exactly to how it would more times than not.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, game 3 of the day, Mike, was between Duke and TCU. The Blue Devils end up winning 81 to 58. It doesn't look close, but it was. TCU did have a
Yeah.
lead in the second half, and if not for a couple of unfortunate whistles, I think they could have been in this game. Just so many fouls on TCU, and look, they're a physical team. They play hard inside. They do foul a lot, and I think a few of them were fouls, but Duke has not looked super sharp, and if not for favorable whistles, this is probably a closer game, and maybe they lose. But Duke has not been impressive to me through these first two games.
Yeah, you look at this game and you see a 23-point game. You look like it was a blowout. But in reality, TCU was just in foul trouble the entire game. This game was tied with with 13 minutes to go in this one. Uh, TCU absolutely had a chance to win this game as long as they could, stay out of foul trouble, and they didn't. And after that point, when it got tied, Duke started to roll. You looked at the foul trouble. I think only one guy fouled out for TCU, but you had a bunch of others that had four fouls, and it happened early and often. So unfortunately, the Horned Frogs weren't able to hang around. But I agree, Sean. This is two straight games where Duke kind of limped in through. It's clearly showing that they're without, one of their star players, and Cam Boozer is really good and all, but they need to have a full team if they're going to be able to make a deep run into the Final Four, I think.
And Gongba does come back here, Mike. Just 13 minutes. I thought he was really solid in the minutes he played. 4 points, 4
Yeah.
rebounds, 4 assists, and he only had one listed block here, but he had a couple more really good challenges at the rim. But yeah, like Duke is sort of built like a lot of the really good teams. They shut off the water at the rim. They have a couple of really good scorers, and a little bit differently, but Duke doesn't really have a bench here. They went basically 6 players against Siena. They went basically 7 here. But yeah, they're just not super sharp right now. And I know they've won the ACC tournament and they won the first 2 games here and they're in the Sweet 16. But I think if they play like this, the way that they did in these first 2 games, I think they lose in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, like if I'm being honest, I don't think this is a championship team without Caleb Foster.
Yeah.
Um, I have them right now losing to Michigan State, and I have Duke playing Kansas, but the way that St. John's has looked, in the first round of the tournament against Northern Iowa, you got to go back and realize, and I think for a lot of us, we didn't really think about this. St. John's has won 20 of 21 basketball games.
Yeah, if you do the Torvik the day after they had that horrible game against Connecticut. I don't remember what it was, but if you put Torvik the day after that to now, they are the 4th best team in the country, St. John's. So if that matchup happens, I think it's going to be very interesting. But the Foster thing, Mike, is huge. They cannot cover the ball
Yeah.
at the top of the key. They've had to go zone against Siena and TCU in these 2 games to get control of it, and like TCU and Siena are nowhere near the top of offenses. That's
No.
what held TCU back this year. They're pretty good defensively, but not a consistent offensive threat. But yeah, if they have to go up against Darren
Darian
Peterson, for
Peterson?
example, he's going to have
Yeah.
30
No
easily.
shot.
And if
Yeah.
they have to go against St. John's, you have Hopkins and Sinan and Sellers to attack from the guard positions. So, yeah, they're going to have a long week of defensive practice, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a tough one. So we'll see what happens for Duke. Look, they're going to have. Luckily, they were able to get out of here unscathed into the second weekend, so they'll have a week to prep. But like you said, I think without Caleb Foster, it's going to be a hard time against St. John's or Kansas, depending on how good of a game Peterson can have.
All right, the next game here, Mike, was Texas A&M and M and Houston, and this game was not one that is going to be remembered for a lot of reasons. It wasn't particularly close. Houston, a class above. They end up stretching that halftime lead out to 18, and then it's more the same in the second half. But Houston, to me, they're going under the radar a little bit with how well they're playing. Like they are
Yeah, I
really
mean,
competing, and I think they are probably my pick to come out of the South region.
They're right now one of the best, if not the best, defensive team in college basketball. They had some struggles at times during the Big 12 regular season. A few games that were way closer than they should have been, but they really picked up their performance going into the Big 12 tournament. Dominated Kansas in one game and then had a narrow loss to Arizona in the championship game. So this is a team that's just consistently looked a lot better, and I'm going to be really excited to see them. Look, I think that it looks like they're going to play Illinois if things continue as they are in the Sweet 16. And you're talking about the most efficient offense versus one of the best defenses in college basketball. My tendency is always to pick the defensive team in that one. So I think Houston right now has a really, really clean shot to the Final Four, as long as they can get past Illinois and maybe even eventually Florida.
And I think this team, Mike, and look, they made the championship game last year, and we're in a great spot to win it. But I think
Should have won.
this
Yeah.
year's offense is a little bit better. I think, like this game today against Buckyball and Texas A&M would could throw teams like this for a loop that haven't seen it. But Houston, to me, like they just haven't been caught up in like the fanfare of the tournament yet. They're like, let's show up, let's do our business, and let's get out of there. Like their games
Seems
haven't
like a
been
Kelvin Sampson way of playing.
their games haven't been eventful for all at all. And as a 2 seed, that's really good. And yeah, I think that they
Yeah.
are under the radar, really, really playing well. And then in terms of Texas A&M, Mike, obviously another first year coach who has gotten not only to the dance but a tournament win. I think Texas A&M, they have a bunch of seniors. It's probably going to be a different look next year. But how are you judging this season from Texas A&M, and how do you think it looks going into the future? Like, is this sort of gimmicky full court press style? Is there a ceiling to it?
Yeah, look, I think all in all, I think A&M is looking at this season. Fans in Aggieland are going to feel good about it. Yeah, you barely got in with a 10 seed, but with a new coach, and it was a late departure too by Buzz Williams.
And they
They're
weren't
still
good early
able.
in the season. Their whole resume
No,
was
no,
SEC play.
got run off the floor by Oklahoma State. Lost every game against a Power Five opponent in the out of conference, and then things kind of flipped the switch as soon as they got in conference. They got a couple of big wins, stumbled a little bit coming down the stretch, but was still able to beat Kentucky, which was big for them. Look, I think this is a good year. A&M is not a basketball powerhouse by any means. A&M has the money if they want to invest it in basketball. I'm just not sure they've really gotten that far yet. Um, we've seen people try to play full court presses for 40 minutes. We saw it at times with Bob Huggins at West Virginia. We saw a little bit with Shaka Smart at VCU. You just got to have the athletes to do it. So if A&M has the athletes to be able to do full court press game in and game out, yeah, they'll probably continue to do it. But unless you've got your Javon Carters like they had back in the day at West Virginia, it's not really going to be possible.
And I do think it's a little bit different than that, though, especially press Virginia. Like, that was just full court man, pretty much. This is like
Yeah,
some trapped zone stuff that they mix in. And like it is way
a little more like
way
VCU
a
with
little bit
Shaka.
more like the havoc, yeah. Like, and he has turned the dial down on that a little bit over the years when he was at Texas and now at Marquette. But and Patino
Yeah.
does it to an extent too, where they basically just pick up full court for the whole game. I don't know if they can get to like an elite team with that, but if you're Bucky McMillan and Texas A&M, they're going to live with this. If you make the tournament and have an exciting style, that's going to be just fine there in College Station.
Yeah.
But they have had a few really heavy losses to some of the better teams this year. In terms of
Yeah.
the other games, Mike, I think that's pretty much it. We've got 2 games in progress now, and VCU might be losing by a lot here, but they were in this position 2 days ago, and they live to fight another day. So maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna leave this one to tomorrow or Monday. But Mike, unless you got
Yeah,
anything else to add, I think we'll wrap it up.
I think you'll talk more about VCU Illinois tomorrow, but Nick Lewis being out for the Rams really really a big impact on this game. Going down in the first, I think 40 seconds or whatever of this one. So um, that one really a bummer for the Rams, but certainly would not overlook what would be a very successful first season. As someone that lived in Richmond, there was a lot of uncertainty coming into this season for VCU basketball, but Martelli's squad really has exceeded expectations.
Yeah, and Martelli took over under difficult circumstances at his first job at Bryant. Jared Grosso had some off the court stuff where he ended up either resigning or getting fired like a few weeks before the season. He did a great job there with the Bulldogs at Bryant, and this is another coach, Mike, year one with a tournament win. So I think VCU
Yeah,
is, and a ton of coaches have done well there, and it might just be like Utah State where you just they can get anybody who's at least a decent coach in there and they do
yeah.
well, or they could be really good at identifying good coaches. Either way, the program's in a good spot, whether, however long Martelli is there or not.
And VCU has, you wouldn't expect it, but they have really good NIL
Yeah,
backing right
especially
there,
for A10 standards.
especially for A10 standards, and especially that they do not have a football program. They're able to invest all of their money, which in some years has been close to 13 million, into their basketball program. So VCU definitely has the capabilities of having long-term sustained success. And I think they also have the capabilities to lock down a coach like Martelli long term. If he, finds that he enjoys his time in Richmond there at VCU, they definitely have the funds to keep him there long term and keep him happy.
And when it comes to conference realignment, Mike, I think the Big East might be trying to target some good basketball institutions without a football program. What better one comes to mind other than VCU? Like,
Yeah,
if the Big East is trying to build out of this, I guess rut. I mean, they had two national champions, so I don't know. But if they're thinking about maybe expanding
we
this
need more depth.
conference with some more depth, I think really any of the top A10 schools would do it, whether it's VCU, Dayton, St. Louis. I think there's some other conference teams that could get in there too.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a real possibility that that's something that could be explored. But Mike, we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.